And we are recording as well. Music up. It's time for Clubhouse Chatter. Here's Norm Ordez.
Hey, welcome back for the second show of the morning. And my second guest is quite possibly the hardest working man in baseball. And his name is Todd Dennis, and he is from Fairbanks, Alaska, and he is with the Alaska Goldpanners. Todd, how you doing this morning?
Doing great. Thanks so much.
And so a lot of people don't know who anything about the Alaskan Baseball League. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. We take a bunch of college baseball players and throw them all together in kind of an all-star league here up in Alaska. The highest level of amateur baseball in America. The idea is to have these college players that are used to playing on the weekends with aluminum bats, playing every single day with wood bats, and get a chance to see what kind of professional potential these guys have. And so there's a lot of scouting that goes on and a lot of professional teams that are watching up here. And a lot of these guys end up going into the professional baseball leagues and all the way up to the major leagues.
And the Goldpanners, actually, Brian and I were looking at former Goldpanners, and you have an impressive roster. And why don't you tell us a few of those guys on who they are?
Yeah, this has been a really exciting year for recruiting. The Goldpanners have always had great teams, but this kind of harkens back, this year does, to the great Goldpanner teams of the 80s. I mean, we've got guys from great Division I schools like Long Beach State and Oregon State University and Pepperdine, and just a bunch of great schools. Cal State Fullerton are represented here on the Goldpanner Club, and it's really fun to see these really top-tier schools send players up to Alaska for the opportunity, and they've been doing great. It's just really a top-notch club this year.
So the Alaskan League, so you've got the Cape Cod League, you've got here in Oregon, you've got the West Coast League that it has Washington and BC. So now it's comparable to those leagues, correct?
Well, it's the same type of arrangement as far as the programs are concerned. Now, it's the issue of what kind of caliber of baseball it is. I personally believe that up here in Alaska, everybody fights a little harder for their clubs. The idea is that the game of baseball itself is represented here as well as anywhere. Not to talk bad about the Cape Cod League, it's usually considered the top league, but it's more of a showcase league that's more of a combine for the professional leagues. The players there only have 15-day contracts, and so it's not really team baseball like you're used to seeing. And every team up here has a roster that's fighting for their club all summer long, and the rivalries between the clubs are intense, and they last all summer long, all the way up into the championships.
Now, are you guys still involved with the National Baseball Congress?
We are. In fact, the Goldpanners have been members of the NBC since 1961, made their first appearance in the tournament in Wichita, Kansas, the World Series in 1962, and the Goldpanners are scheduled to go back to the NBC World Series again this year. So it's a great relationship that goes back many years. The Goldpanners have won the tournament more than any other club in its 80-year history of the World Series, dating back to 1939, and Goldpanners hope to extend that lead this year.
So people always are coming up with bucket lists in baseball, and on my bucket list is the Midnight Sun game. And one of these days, I'm going to make it to Fairbanks for that. And why don't you tell us a little bit about the Midnight Sun game?
Sure. This year was our 109th playing of the Midnight Sun game. It's a tradition in Fairbanks, Alaska that dates back all the way to 1906. Started off as a bet between two local bars over the long, cold winter as to which was the greater baseball team, and it was determined on June 21st, the longest day of the year, a game that was played through the hour of midnight, never using artificial lights. It's a amazing phenomenon up here so close to the Arctic Circle, where we get over 23 hours of daylight, pretty close to 24 hours of sun on the summer solstice. And so we commemorate that with the ball game. And this year the Goldpanners took on the Lake Erie Monarchs from Michigan. And it was a very exciting game that the Goldpanners were able to pull out with a final of 13-6 over the Monarchs.
So now I have chatted with former ball players who have came on and went professional. The latest one was a gentleman by the name of Jake Dunning, who,
yes.
gosh, was he 2006 or 7, I think, with you guys.
Yeah, Jake was a great goaltender in 2008. He was actually an infielder for us, but it happens so many times when guys have particular talents or strengths in their game, in which case with Jake it was his arm, that he was converted to a pitcher and made it all the way to the major leagues that way with the San Francisco Giants.
Yes, and he was with Salem Kaiser here in Oregon, and I was chatting with him a little bit about playing for the Goldpanners, and he said it was a great experience, probably by far the best of his baseball career at that time. And he talked about taking batting practice at 3:00 in the morning and it still being light, and they didn't have to have lights and whatnot. And tell us about some of the other teams there in Alaska. So I know in the past that there's been the North Pole Knicks. Do they still exist?
No, the Knicks aren't in operation anymore, but they were a great part of the Alaska Baseball League with a number of excellent teams and graduates into the major leagues as well.
And so what is your involvement with the Goldpanners, and what is your official title?
Well, I'm the general manager of the Goldpanners. This is my 3rd season in the GM position. It's my 35th season overall working for the team, dating back to 1981 when I started selling hot dogs in the stands, and basically just did every position with the club through the years, and having a great time now, just continuing the tradition of working with the Goldpanners, and it's been a lot of fun.
So what sets apart, in your mind, what sets apart the Alaskan Baseball League from any other league? I mean, one, is it the location? Is it the fact that you're able to play baseball, games like the Midnight Sun? I mean, what is so special about the Alaskan Baseball League?
I think one thing that makes it very special is the brand of baseball itself. A lot of these kids are used to the combines and the programs and the camps and the colleges and all of these aspects of baseball that can tend to get a bit stale. It's just so much of the same thing. But when you get to Alaska, it's a completely different world. We have our own baseball universe up here, and it's a version of the sport that's probably the purest form of baseball that you'll find pretty much anywhere in the world. Another element is that a lot of these young guys, some of them are freshmen or sophomores in college, and they've never been away from home. They've never had to stand on their own 2 feet and grow into their own people without the influence of their, all of their home people and programs and all of this. And so what we see is, for the first time in their lives, so many of these kids are able to come up and develop into the adults that they will become. And so like with Jake Dunning, you have so many people that have been through the programs here in Alaska that look back and realize that this was the time when their lives and their baseball and all of these things gelled into one unit that made them the people that they became.
So I think that the Goldpanners have one of the iconic baseball caps in the history, and they have the 49 on the hat. And what is the story behind that?
Well, the organization for the Goldpanners began very, very shortly after statehood. When the state of Alaska was admitted into the Union, it was the 49th state in entry, and so that was commemorated immediately on the Goldpanner hats. The star, of course, representing the star and the flag for Alaska, and the 49 for the 49th state. The Goldpanners have had that hat for decades, ever since probably the very beginning, and had a relationship as well with New Era hats that dates back all the way there too. And so it's just kind of a relationship that saw the design grow in popularity to the point where now even teams that sell professional caps, they will carry a Goldpanners hat as well. One of the only amateur club that is represented in the sales of these hats. So it's very special to see it have become so iconic.
It's crazy. And, looking through, your history of the Goldpanners, and seeing, guys like Tom Seaver, Dave Kingman, Dave Winfield. Dave Winfield, a lot of people don't know, Dave Winfield pitched for the Goldpanners. And,
yes.
You could go on, Mark McGuire, Barry Bonds. You've had quite the history up there. And like I said, one of these days I want to make it out and catch some action. And Jim Campanis Jr., who is a buddy of mine, played with the North Pole Knicks, and he told me that was by far one of the best times in his baseball career as well, was playing for especially the Knicks, because one, their colors were Christmas green and Christmas red, and they actually had a Santa Claus swinging the bat, and so that's a great logo. And so what? How many people actually come to a Goldpanners game? Do you guys get a good turnout?
We do. Our attendance has been up this year as well. It's been very exciting to see. We'll average anywhere in the hundreds, the low hundreds for a weekday game, and higher for the weekends. For the Midnight Sun game, we average about short of 5,000 people for that single game. And so it's a very exciting atmosphere. But one thing that allows these players to develop so much is just the time and the space that they have here to work on every aspect of their game, to where they can try different positions. You mentioned how Winfield was converted from a pitcher. Same is true of Dave Kingman. The same is true of Mark McGuire. Longtime Seattle Mariner Harold Reynolds was moved to his infield position from the outfield. You just have time to work on these things and see what kind of potential you have that maybe hasn't been tapped before. I guess that's maybe a hallmark of the state of Alaska itself, is that you just are forced to reinvent yourself and become strong in whatever those things are that's going to help you survive, help you flourish. And so I think that's what makes the baseball here in Alaska so special, is just the ability to have the time and the space to grow into your fullest potential.
So I'm going to put you on the spot, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, and I totally understand. But can you come up with an all-time Goldpanner team?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's difficult because there's so many different criteria that you could go by. Either the 200-plus major leaguers that we've had, either the guys that have performed the best while they're in Fairbanks. Maybe they didn't even go on and have a professional career. But there's just so many ways to gauge the players that it's difficult to find one that everybody can agree on. But there's so many different players that stand out that it just becomes obvious. In fact, recently in our 55th year here, we listed the top 55 Goldpanners. It's available at our website, goldpanners.com, and in there you'll see some very famous names, but you'll see some names that also didn't even go into professional baseball. And so it's a pretty special list where you can see the history of the Goldpanners played out, not only as they've had their seasons here in Fairbanks, but also gone into the major leagues. There's so many names that could be named, like, Bob Boone is a very famous catcher for his career. Steve Kemp, Oddibe McDowell, Shane Mack. For pitching, we've had some of the great pitchers in the history of the game. Bill Spaceman Lee, Floyd Bannister, who's considered by many to be the greatest left-hander ever. And as far as right-handers are concerned, Tom Seaver and Jim Barr, Greg Harris, Tim Leary, and the list just really goes on and on. It's a very special group, but there have been attempts in the past to name the greatest team, and if the person was forced to do it, you would have something that looks like Rick Monday in the outfield, and Dave Winfield, Tom Seaver, Pete Broberg, Steve Swisher, the father of Nick, as a catcher. It's just really difficult, and it's a great question. And if a person wants to have an opportunity to gauge their own all-time Goldpanner team, they should go to goldpanners.com, because there's various lists that have been done throughout the years, and it's very fun.
It is a lot of fun. And didn't Bill, the Spaceman Lee, didn't he come back a couple of years ago and actually pitch in a Midnight Sun game?
Yes. In fact, Bill was first here in 66 and 67. He started the Midnight Sun game against Kumagai-gumi, Japan, and lost that game. But he came back 42 years later and pitched again for the Goldpanners at the age of 61. And he actually picked up the win in that game. It was amazing. He said that the adrenaline was pumping so much that he felt like he was 39 again.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And Bill, I was thinking as you were talking about, all-time Goldpanner team, I was thinking of character-wise, and definitely Bill's got to be on that list. He's one of, the greatest characters in Major League Baseball ever. And
that's one of the special things about the program. I mean, people ask all the time, what sets the Goldpanners apart? Well, what it is that this was the first program that focused on the collegiate athlete as having the potential to head into the major leagues. It was before all of the schools and all of the programs that we see today. The Goldpanners were the very first ones that used a roster exclusively of amateur ball players. And so it became a kind of a pipeline into the major leagues, and that's just one of the aspects that makes the program special. I mean, you mentioned the special angle with Bill Lee. Well, we also had Andy Messersmith, the all-time first free agent, was a Goldpanner. Barry Bonds was on a team that sent 14 players to the major leagues, not just to professional baseball, but 14 players from the 1983 Goldpanners made it all the way to the major leagues. There's just so many aspects. One of the first players to go straight to the major leagues from college baseball was a Goldpanner, Mike Adamson. Dave Winfield was another guy who skipped the minor leagues. I mean, there's just so many special aspects of the game where the Goldpanners have played a really important part in the history of baseball.
So that 1983 team, did that team win it all that year?
Well, we went to the NBC World Series and sliced through all competition until we got to the championship game. We were facing the Grand Rapids Sullivans from Michigan, and ended up getting 2 hits in the championship game, and were defeated pretty soundly. So we ended up in second place that year.
That is crazy. With that roster, that is crazy. So once again, we have Todd Dennis with the Alaska Goldpanners of Fairbanks. Todd, we definitely thank you for having you on, and we'd love to have you on again sometime soon.
Anytime. Thanks so much. It's great for people to get a chance to realize what kind of special baseball we got going up here in Alaska, and I appreciate the opportunity very much.
And go ahead and plug your website one more time for us.
Yeah, that's goldpanners.com, where you can see all the old history and all the new exciting stuff that's going on.
And definitely check it out. If you're ever up in Alaska, during summertime, I highly recommend you to stop by and catch a game if you can. I haven't done it yet. I've never been to Alaska, period. But, one of these days, it's definitely one of those bucket lists for baseball fans. And Todd, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, once again, Todd Dennis of the Alaska Goldpanners of Fairbanks. Brian, I see you're ready to go because you knew I was going to put you on the spot. What do you think?
I'm just going through the list of 55 greatest players.
Dude, it's crazy.
Brett Backlund, by the way, who I used to play with and against in Kaiser Little League.
Yep.
On there twice. Utility. Wow. Yes, he played in 1990, 91, 92. And, it was pretty interesting. There's some names on here, though, that people would recognize. Dave Winfield on the top of the utility pitcher/hitter list. Steve Kemp.
Yep.
Shane Mack. Odeby McDowell. Just to name a few. There's, just going through here, it's just like Bob Boone, like you guys talked about. My jaw just drops. Manny Estrada's on there.
It's crazy.
It's really nuts.
And then on top of that, you got Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire.
I didn't even get to Floyd Bannister yet.
Floyd Bannister. it's crazy.
Tom Seaver.
There are times when I'm fixing for baseball. I'll go to the Goldpanner site and I'll just stare, at the history of this amateur team. And, I honestly think there's none like it. I mean, you can go to the Cape Cod League and take a look at the teams, their histories and stuff like that, but I don't think it really matches up to what the Goldpanners have done up there in Alaska.
No, it's very cool, and to be up in Alaska and play ball, it's got to be different. I think he said you have to reinvent yourself, and that's what some of those guys do as a player. And what a cool way to do it up there and away from home, and just kind of.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, right, I think at the beginning of June, I think I saw snow on the field.
Oh, really?
So definitely check them out. I'm Norm. This is Brian. I'd like to plug my sponsors. I'd like to plug Carlos and the boys over at Proper Cuts Barbershop on Baker. Go over there and tell Carlos, you know me, you listen. He might give you $1 or $2 off. BaseByPros.com, Mitch Canham, MDM Designs, his dad, does our shirts for us. He's also a big sponsor and listens to us. Mark, thank you very much. I love you, buddy. 9-Inning Know-It-All, part of the 9-Inning Know-It-All group. Baseballisms.com. Save yourself 15% off on your next order by entering Clubhouse Chatter. Clubhouse Chatter will save you 15% off. Baseball Dudes, Krista's Gazelle over there, baseballdudes.com. And I believe we got them all. So we will be back with Rob Schreier, who is the voice of the Salem Kaiser Volcanoes at 9:15. Thank you for listening.